I never imagined a 7-year-old child could break a mother's heart with a single whisper. But that night my son did. It was so unexpected, so quiet. The kind of moment that crawls into your bones and refuses to leave. He tugged on my sleeve with trembling fingers, his little face pale even under the soft lamp glow. And before I could ask what was wrong, he leaned in, so close that I felt his warm breath against my ear, and whispered words that shattered the life I thought I had. "Mommy, Daddy has a lover, and they're going to take all your money." For a second I didn't breathe. The room around me, our cozy Portland living room with its cinnamon candle scent, the muted hum of the dishwasher, the soft ticking of the old wall clock, blurred into silence. My mind stuttered between disbelief and rising panic. I pulled back slowly, staring at Eli, trying to understand if he knew what those words even meant. His eyes told me everything. He was scared, confused, and worst of all, he believed what he heard. "Eli, sweetheart, who told you that?" I managed to ask, though my voice barely sounded like my own. He swallowed hard. "Daddy did. He was on the phone. And he said he didn't want you to know." A cold wave washed over me so violently my fingers went numb. Cole, my husband. The man I trusted. The man I shared a home, a life, a child with. I felt my heartbeat loud in my ears, thudding like something was trying to escape my chest. "What else did you hear, baby?" I whispered. Eli looked down at his little socks, twisting them nervously. "Daddy said she wants your money. All of it. And he said he's tired of hiding things from you." My breath shattered. That was the moment, right then, holding my trembling son in a darkening living room, that I felt something inside me crack in a way I knew would never fully heal. I wrapped my arms around him, pulling him close, trying to steady myself, trying to pretend I wasn't falling apart. "It's okay," I whispered into his hair. "Mommy's here. You did the right thing telling me." But in truth, nothing felt okay. Because deep down, a storm had already begun. A storm that would tear through every lie, every secret, every carefully hidden truth my husband thought he could bury. And I had no idea then that the night my son whispered those words would be the night everything in my life would start to unravel. Eli's whisper didn't leave my mind for a single second. Even after I tucked him into bed, even after I kissed his forehead and told him everything would be okay, even though I wasn't sure of that myself, his words kept echoing inside me like a warning I couldn't escape. The hallway outside his room felt colder that night. Maybe it was the draft slipping under the old windows, or maybe it was the sudden emptiness I felt in a house that used to feel warm. Cole wasn't home. He had texted earlier saying, "Running late. Work stuff." A message I'd seen so many times over the past months that it no longer even registered as suspicious. Until now. I walked slowly toward the living room, the wooden floor creaking under my feet. The house felt wrong. Not haunted, not eerie, just heavy. Like the truth was trapped inside the walls, waiting for me to stop pretending everything was normal. My hands were shaking when I reached the couch. I sat down, staring at the laundry basket still half full. Suddenly, folding clothes felt like the most pointless thing in the world. I pressed my palms against my eyelids and let out a slow, trembling breath. A lover? My husband? Taking my money? The words felt too surreal to belong to my life. But children don't invent sentences like that. They repeat what they hear. Something cold twisted in my stomach. I tried to think logically, but logic deserted me. Instead, memories started spilling through my mind like pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. Cole coming home late. Cole locking his phone the moment he saw me. Cole showering immediately after walking through the door. Cole avoiding eye contact whenever I asked about work. How had I been so blind? A sharp sound snapped me out of my thoughts, the sound of my phone vibrating against the wooden table. I leaned forward and picked it up. A message from Cole. "Don't wait up. Might stay at the office tonight." My throat tightened. The office? On a Sunday night? After our son overheard him whispering to another woman. I put the phone down slowly, my fingers trembling. I wasn't stupid. And I wasn't naive. I was hurt, blindsided, and terrified, but not stupid. I stood up and walked toward the kitchen, needing water, needing air, needing something that made sense. I opened the fridge and stared inside. But the cold light only made the silence in the room feel louder. For the first time, the house didn't feel like home. It felt like a place where lies lived, where secrets hid, where I had been living in a story everyone knew except me. I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge until my knuckles turned white. "Why, Cole?" I whispered to the empty room. "Why would you do this to us?" But deep down, I already knew. People don't just cheat on their partners. They cheat when something darker is pulling them someplace they shouldn't be. And if there really was a woman, what kind of lover encourages a man to steal from the mother of his child? That question felt like a knife. I took a shaky breath and forced myself to think clearer. I needed to know more. I needed to be sure. I couldn't crumble based on a whisper, not even one from my son. My eyes drifted toward the staircase toward Eli's room. Should I ask him more? No. He'd already done more than enough. This was my burden to carry, my truth to uncover, and I would uncover it, because something inside me, something fierce and protective, had woken up that night. And once a mother's instinct awakens, there's no force strong enough to stop her. That night, my brother decided he would stay awake again. But this time there was a strange fear inside him, like something was warning him, whispering, "Don't stay awake, or you'll see what you're not meant to see." Still, he put his phone away, turned off the light, and lay quietly, staring at the wall. At 2:43 a.m., a sudden cold draft slipped under his door. He sat up instantly. Then it came again. Thak. This time the sound was closer, much closer, as if someone was standing right outside his room. He gathered his courage, opened the door, but there was no one there, only darkness, and the faint sound of heavy breathing coming from the hallway. He slowly walked forward, and that's when he saw it on the floor. A large branch, slightly wet, the exact kind of wetness you find on freshly dug soil near a grave. He hesitated, then picked it up. The moment his fingers touched it, everything froze. The house, the air, the silence. Felt like even time stopped. And then, from that same branch came a faint, suffocating sound. Ka-ha-ka, like someone buried deep underground, struggling to breathe. Terrified, he dropped the branch. But the real horror was only just beginning. And suddenly, from the same wall, the wall where the first whisper came, ****, a voice spoke. "Let me finish my story." It was soft, but so clear, as if someone was speaking right beside his ear. My brother froze. His feet felt nailed to the ground. The voice continued, "I'm not alone. He's waking up too. The one who's not alive, but refuses to stay dead." And then, the entire wall began to tremble. Shaking, vibrating, as if something was crawling inside it. He ran toward his room in panic, but just as he grabbed the doorknob, scratch. Some finger, scraped across the floor, right beside his foot, as though something underneath was trying to reach him. My brother slammed the bedroom door behind him, his chest rising and falling like he had just escaped a burning building. He locked it, stepped back, waited. Silence. But silence can be worse than sound, because it gives your imagination permission to scream. He pressed his ear to the door. Nothing. He almost relaxed, until he heard it. A whisper, right behind him. Not from the door, not from the floor, from inside the room. A breathy, shaking voice. "I know your name." His entire body stiffened. He felt a cold drip of sweat slide down his spine. Slowly, very slowly, he turned around. There was no one there. But the voice came again, this time from the corner of the ceiling. "Raza." The same dragging tone you hear from someone whose throat is full of dirt. My brother didn't move. He didn't even blink. He just stared at the dark corner, where the two walls met the ceiling. And then, something shifted. Not like a shadow, not like an animal, more like a shape, unfolding itself after being folded for years. A long, crooked limb appeared first, then a second, then a hunched, distorted figure crawled down the wall, like gravity didn't exist for it. No face, only a stretched, black, soil-coated head, and a long mouth, a mouth that didn't belong to anything living. The creature twisted its neck slowly, until that empty, hollow head pointed directly at my brother. And then it whispered, almost lovingly, "Your father knows who I am." My brother shook his head, terrified. No, you're lying. My father, The creature cut him off. With a disturbing smile you could feel more than see. Ask him why he buried me when I was still breathing. The creature crawled forward. Each movement sounded like bones grinding against metal. My brother backed up until he touched the cold room wall. He couldn't even scream. The creature stopped inches from his face and whispered, "Tell him I'm awake." Then everything went still. The room light flickered. The creature dissolved into black smoke, and the smoke sank into the cracks of the floor, as if returning to a grave that wasn't supposed to open. Next chapter, you'll finally learn, what did their father bury? Why is it calling his sons? And why now? The house felt wrong the next morning. Too quiet, too heavy, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. My brother didn't sleep. He just sat on the edge of his bed until sunrise, hands trembling, ears still echoing with that sickening whisper, "Tell him I'm awake." When daylight came, he finally walked downstairs. Dad was in the kitchen, staring into a cup of untouched coffee. His hands were shaking, not from age, from fear. My brother sat across from him. Neither spoke. For a long time, only the sound was the clock ticking. Tick, tick, tick. Then Dad lifted his eyes, but only halfway, like he was scared that full eye contact might break him open. "What did you see?" he asked quietly. My brother didn't want to answer, but the creature's words forced themselves out. It said, "You buried it alive." Dad's fingers tightened around the coffee mug until it cracked. A thin line of coffee dripped onto the table. He didn't even notice. Instead, in a voice that seemed years older, Dad whispered, "Then it's found you too." A cold wave hit my brother. "Found me? What do you mean to?" Dad finally lifted his head fully. His eyes were red, exhausted, and full of a guilt my brother had never seen before. "I hoped, I prayed, it would never come back." He took a long, shaky breath. "But if it spoke to you, then it's stronger than before." My brother swallowed hard. "What is it?" Dad didn't answer immediately. He stood up, walked to the window, and stared at the backyard, specifically at the old oak tree beside the broken shed. He pointed to the ground beneath it. "That's where I buried him." The word him, not it, felt like a kick to the chest. My brother's heart dropped. "Dad, who is he?" Silence. Dad's throat bobbed as he swallowed. Then, "Your uncle." The room felt like it tilted sideways. My brother froze. We don't have an uncle." Dad's eyes filled with tears he didn't wipe away. "Yes," he said. "You do." Then in a trembling whisper, "And I killed him." My brother felt the air leave his lungs. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too bright, too exposed. "You killed him." The words barely made it out of his mouth. Dad didn't move from the window. He stood stiff, hands gripping the windowsill, as if letting go would make the past rush back in. "I was 19, he said quietly. "Your uncle was 17. We lived in this same house. Your grandmother, she never told you about him. She wanted to erase him, pretend he never existed." My brother tried to breathe steadily, but his chest felt tight. "What happened?" Dad sighed, a long, painful exhale that carried decades of guilt. "He wasn't normal," Dad said. "Not since he was a kid. He heard voices, talked to shadows, laughed at things that weren't there. He finally turned around, his eyes hollow and broken. But then he stopped fearing them, and they stopped fearing him." My brother blinked. "Meaning?" Dad stepped closer, voice dropping lower. "He started doing things no 17-year-old should know how to do. He knew when neighbors would die. He knew when storms were coming, down to the minute. He knew people's secrets, even the ones they never said out loud." A chill crept up my brother's spine. Dad continued, "One night, I woke up and found him standing in the hallway, covered in mud. He swallowed. And smiling. My brother whispered, "Why?" Dad's voice cracked. "Because he said he wasn't alone anymore." A beat. He said something climbed out of the ground to meet him. My brother stepped back instinctively. What climbed out? Dad shook his head slowly. I never saw it. I never wanted to. But whatever it was, he let it inside him. Dad's hands trembled now. His voice was barely a whisper. He changed after that. His voice, his face, the way he moved, everything felt wrong. He wasn't my brother anymore. My brother felt the tingling fear creep down his arms. What did he do? He whispered. Dad closed his eyes. That same night, he came into my room and stood by my bed, just staring, for hours. And then, he leaned down, Dad said, his voice shaking, and whispered exactly what it told you last night. My brother's stomach dropped. Tell him, I'm awake. Dad nodded. And that's when I knew, if I didn't stop him, something worse would happen. My brother felt cold all the way through. You killed him because of that? Dad shook his head slowly. No. A long pause. I killed him because he tried to kill me first. The kitchen felt silent again, but not empty. Something in the house felt like it was listening. The light coming through the kitchen window suddenly felt colder, as if the sun itself had stepped back from the story Dad was about to tell. My brother stood frozen, his heartbeat thudding like slow, heavy knocks against his ribs. Dad pulled out a chair and sat down, but he didn't relax. His shoulders stayed tight. His eyes locked on the table as if the memories were carved into the wood. When your uncle tried to kill me, Dad said quietly, he wasn't using his own strength. My brother swallowed. What do you mean? Dad looked up, and for the first time, there was something like pure fear in his eyes. He grabbed me by the throat and lifted me off the ground. My brother blinked. That's impossible. I know, Dad snapped softly. I know what a normal person can do. This wasn't that. He rubbed his throat unconsciously, as if he could still feel those fingers there. His eyes weren't his. They were completely black. Not like pupils. Like he didn't have eyes at all. My brother's breath caught. Dad continued, voice shaky now. He said he needed a body. A new one. A stronger one. And that I'd do. The room temperature dropped another degree. My brother whispered, what did you do? Dad looked toward the backyard again. Toward that old oak tree. The one that had always felt a little too still. A little too silent. I fought him, Dad said. I didn't think. I just grabbed what I could. What did you grab? Dad hesitated. A shovel. My brother's stomach turned. He lunged at me, Dad said. And I hit him. Dad stared at his hands, as if he could still see the blood on them. But he kept getting up, over and over. He didn't feel pain anymore. My brother felt a wave of nausea. So how did you stop him? Dad swallowed hard. I realized something. Whatever was inside him wasn't fully awake yet. It was using him, but it didn't understand everything a human body needed. He looked directly at my brother. It couldn't breathe. A chill slid down my brother's spine. So I held him under, Dad whispered. In the creek behind the house. He thrashed for a while, and then he went still. My brother felt his legs weaken. Dad's voice dropped lower, trembling. But the second he died, the ground shook, like something underneath us was angry. A silence fell, thick, suffocating, alive. What did you bury under that tree? My brother asked. Dad's jaw tightened. Not your uncle, he said. My brother's heart stopped. Dad looked at him with haunted eyes. I buried what crawled out of him. The kitchen clock kept ticking, but somehow every tick sounded slower. Then the last, like time itself was hesitating. My brother felt rooted to the floor, his skin prickling with cold sweat. You buried it, he whispered. Under the oak tree? Dad nodded once. Slow, heavy, regretful. Yes. I didn't know what else to do, he said. I thought, if I buried it deep enough, if I packed the soil tight enough, Maybe it would stay asleep forever. My brother swallowed hard. Dad, what was it? What did it look like? Dad didn't answer immediately. He closed his eyes, pressing his fingers to his temples, as though the memory itself was something sharp he had to pull out carefully. When it crawled out of your uncle, Dad said softly, it didn't come out like a creature. Came out like smoke. Black, oily, cold. My brother's heartbeat quickened. Smoke. Dad shook his head. No, not smoke. Smoke disappears. This didn't. It held its shape, like a shadow trying to be a person, but forgetting how. A shiver ran through my brother's spine. It had arms, Dad whispered. Too long, too thin. And its face. He trailed off. My brother leaned closer. What about its face? Dad opened his eyes full of a decades-old terror. It didn't have one, just darkness, a hole shaped like a head. My brother nearly stepped back. And it talked, Dad said hoarsely. Not from a mouth, just everywhere. Inside the air. Inside my head. My brother's voice shook. What did it say? Dad swallowed hard. It said your uncle was its first shell. And I had killed him. What else? Dad looked directly at him, breathing unevenly. It said it would wait. And when the ground was soft again, when it healed, it would rise. A cold silence filled the kitchen. And now, my brother whispered, it's awake. Dad didn't speak. He just slowly raised a trembling hand and pointed to the ceiling. At first my brother heard nothing. Then, a creak. Soft, slow, like weight shifting on the floorboards overhead. My brother's blood ran cold. That's Mom's room, he said. Dad shook his head. No. His voice cracked. She went to the store. Another creak, heavier this time. Something was definitely up there. Moving. My brother felt his breath hitch. Then who? Dad whispered the answer he never wanted to say. It followed you. A louder sound echoed. A dragging noise. Slow and deliberate. Dad grabbed my brother's arm. Listen to me. Don't look at its face. Don't talk to it. Don't answer its questions. That's how it gets in. The floor above them groaned, as if something very heavy was shifting its weight. Right above their heads. My brother whispered shakily, what does it want? Dad's voice dropped to a trembling whisper. You. The dragging sound above them scraped through the ceiling again. Slow, heavy, closer to the stairs now. My brother couldn't breathe. His knees weakened, and he reached for the counter to steady himself. Dad, he whispered. Why me? Why is it after me? Dad grabbed his arm tighter. Because you heard it, he said. That's all it needs. Once you hear its voice, it knows you exist. It knows your name. And it won't stop. The house vibrated with another sound. A low, hollow thud, like something had hit the wall at the top of the stairs. Then silence. Terrible, suffocating silence. My brother whispered, is it already inside? Dad shook his head. It doesn't break in. It seeps in. A faint whisper drifted down the staircase. Not loud, not sharp, but almost like breath sliding along the walls. Are you there? My brother froze. The voice was wrong. It didn't sound like speech. It sounded like air shaped into words, by something that had never learned how to speak. Dad held a finger to his lips. Don't answer. The whisper came again, this time right at the edge of hearing. I know you're home. My brother felt his nails dig into his palms. His stomach twisted painfully. Dad leaned close and whispered, it always starts soft. It wants you to respond. Just once. Even a sound. If you do, it comes faster. Another thud. Then a slow, deliberate step on the stairs. Creak, creak. My brother's heart hammered so loudly, he worried the creature would hear that. He mouthed silently to Dad. What do we do? Dad swallowed. We go out the back door. Quietly. We don't let it see us. If it does, it won't stop following. My brother nodded. They moved tiptoe slow, barely brushing the kitchen floor, heading toward the back exit. But as Dad reached for the door handle, they both heard it. A whisper so close, so intimate, it felt like it was right behind their ears. "Why are you leaving?" Dad's hand stiffened on the knob. My brother's entire body went cold. He didn't want to look. He didn't want to turn around. He knew he shouldn't. But the voice slid against his spine like cold fingers. And then said his name. His real name. Soft, slow, perfectly pronounced. "Come back." Dad faced forward, voice trembling. "Don't turn around. Not even a glance." My brother swallowed thickly. "It knows my name," he whispered. Dad shut his eyes. "It learned it last night. When it whispered to you. When you heard it. That's how it begins." Another step. Then another. Coming down the stairs. Coming toward them. The whisper deepened. "I've been waiting." Dad jerked the back door open. "Run," he breathed. "Now." My brother didn't think. He sprinted into the backyard, feet slipping in the damp grass, heart punching his ribs. Behind him he heard Dad slam the door shut, and then something slam into the door. A furious hollow impact, like a body made of wood and bone. Dad stumbled out after him. They ran toward the old oak tree, the place Dad said he had buried it, the place where the ground had trembled, as if something inside it still wanted out. My brother gasped. "What do we do now?" Dad turned toward the tree, sweat dripping down his forehead. "We dig," he said. My brother stared at him in horror. "Why?" Dad wiped a trembling hand across his mouth. "Because I didn't bury it deep enough." My brother's entire body went numb. The thing at the bottom of the staircase didn't move. Not yet. But the whisper in his ear felt warm, wet, impossibly close. He spun around, but there was no one behind him. Only empty kitchen air. Yet the voice lingered, like breath on his skin. Dad yanked him back, his hands shaking violently. "Don't turn your back on it," he hissed. My brother could barely speak. "Dad, it whispered to me, right behind me. How is that even possible?" Dad didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the creature that now stood perfectly still, as though choosing who to move toward first. And then, without warning, its head snapped sideways in a jerky, unnatural motion, like a puppet whose strings had been pulled too hard. It stared at them, not with eyes, not with a face, but with intention. My brother grabbed Dad's arm. "Dad, why does it think I'm him? Why does it think I'm your brother?" Dad swallowed hard, so hard it sounded painful. "Because you weren't supposed to be born looking like him." My brother froze. "What?" The creature took one step forward. Only one. But the floorboards trembled beneath its weight. Dad slowly backed them up. His voice rushed low, desperate. "Your uncle, he had the same eyes. The same voice when he was your age. And after what happened, I prayed your mother wouldn't see the resemblance." My brother's throat tightened. "What resemblance?" "Dad, what are you saying?" Dad didn't answer, because the creature spoke for him. But this time, the voice that filled the room was not the creature's imitation. It was a boy's voice, a teenage boy, one Dad recognized instantly. "Brother." Dad's knees nearly buckled. "No," he whispered. "No, you don't get to use his voice." The creature took another step, slow, dragging its two long limbs. The kitchen lights flickered, as if the air around it was swallowing every spark of electricity. Then the voice changed again, softening, shifting, becoming my brother's voice. Perfectly. "Dad, don't lie to him." My brother felt his blood turn to ice. "Dad, what is it talking about?" Dad closed his eyes. "It knows things it shouldn't," he whispered. "That's how it gets inside you. It uses memories that aren't yours, voices that aren't yours." But the creature wasn't done. Took one more step, and the room seemed to grow darker around it. Then, with a slow, twisting motion of its head, it said something that made my brother's stomach drop, this time in a woman's voice. His grandmother's voice. He wasn't the only one born with it. Dad sucked in a sharp breath. "No, don't listen." But the creature kept going, still using his grandmother's voice. There were two boys in this bloodline. who could hear the ground whisper. My brother staggered backward. "Dad, what is it saying?" Dad finally broke. His face crumpled. Tears welled in his eyes. And he whispered the truth. He never wanted to say aloud. "It's not confusing you with your uncle." A trembling breath. "It's calling you what you are." My brother felt the room spin. What am I?" The creature leaned forward. Just a little. And the shadows around its body pulsed, as if excited. Then it whispered, using no voice at all, just vibrating through the walls, through the air, through their bones. A door. The house felt different that night, as if the walls were breathing. I walked down the narrow hallway slowly, holding my phone's flashlight low, letting the beam glide along the old wooden floor. Every step echoed back at me, delayed by half a second, like something else was walking in the same rhythm. But behind me, I tried to ignore it. But when I reached the end of the hallway, that old locked door, the one the owner strictly warned me about, seemed to be pulsing. The wooden frame trembled softly, almost like something inside was pressing a slow heartbeat against it. I froze. That door had always looked ordinary in daylight, but now it felt alive. As I got closer, a sudden thud slammed from inside. Then another. Then a third, stronger, shaking dust from the ceiling. My breath hitched and I stepped back, the flashlight trembling in my hand. Something was hitting the door from the inside, and whatever it wasn't panicking. It was deliberate, measured, a rhythm like knocking but too forceful to be human. I leaned in without meaning to, my fear pulling me forward instead of backward. The house was silent, painfully silent, except for my breathing. Then through the tiny gap between the door and its frame, a whisper slipped out. A dry, raspy voice that dragged across my spine like a cold finger. It whispered my name. Not loud, not angry, soft, familiar, like it had been waiting. I stepped back immediately. My heart pounded so hard I thought the thing inside could hear it. As I stared at the door, the hallway lights flickered violently. First slow, then rapid, then everything dimmed, leaving me in a wash of cold, unstable light. My breath turned white in front of me. Then the lock clicked. Once, twice. Slow, deliberate movements from inside the room. The latch slid open with a metallic grind that scraped the silence apart. I didn't even have time to react before the door creaked open an inch. A smell leaked out. Old wood, damp soil, and something sharp and metallic underneath. Something that reminded me of rusted iron. The door pushed itself open another inch. My flashlight beam hit the darkness inside. But it swallowed the light like the room had no walls, no shape, no end. But then something shifted. At first it looked like a hunched figure sitting on the floor. Still. Motionless. Too motionless. But as I squinted, the shape began to rise. Slowly, awkwardly, unfolding in angles that made my stomach twist. No human stands like that. No human bends like that. I felt my legs lock, my body refusing to move as the figure straightened. I could hear nothing except the faint crackling of my flashlight and the slow creak of the door. And then from deep within the darkness of that small room, the whisper came again. Clear this time. You shouldn't have come. Before I could run, the door slammed open with a force that shook the entire hallway. The figure lunged forward into the light, not fully visible, not fully formed, just a rush of darkness and cold air moving straight toward me. And the last thing I remember before I stumbled back was the sound of something dragging across the floor behind it. Like it wasn't alone. I stumbled backward so fast I hit the hallway wall, my shoulder slamming into the wooden panel hard enough to knock the breath out of me. The thing in the doorway didn't rush at me the way a person would. Instead, it moved in short, broken motions like it was learning how to use a body it didn't fully understand. The shadows around it shifted unnaturally, stretching long across the floor even though there was barely any light to cast them. My flashlight flickered, fighting for life. For a second, in one brief pulse of light, I saw its face, or what was trying to be a face. It wasn't shaped right. The skin didn't match the bones underneath. The mouth was too low, the eyes too far apart, and the color a dull, grayish tone like clay that had never fully dried. It looked like something trying to imitate a human but failing in the most unsettling way. I choked on my breath. My body refused to run. The figure tilted its head, slow and jerky, as if the movement caused it pain. Then it stepped forward, and every board under its weight groaned like the house itself didn't want it there. It was tall, taller than any man I had ever seen, but its shoulders were slumped like its body couldn't hold itself together. Something was wrong with the air. It felt heavier, colder, like a storm was forming inside the hallway. Then I heard it, soft footsteps behind me. Not mine. I froze. Something else was in the hallway. Something smaller, lighter, moving carefully, almost silently. My throat tightened as I slowly turned my head, the flashlight barely hanging on to life as it sputtered in my hand. At the far end of the hallway, just past the staircase, a silhouette stood. A child. Still. Quiet. Watching me. My stomach dropped. My son wasn't here. He was hours away at home safe. And yet, the shape at the end of the hallway had his height, his outline, the tilt of the head, even the slight sway he did when he was anxious. "Ethan," I whispered without meaning to. The child didn't reply. The tall figure in front of me made a low, grinding sound like rocks scraping together. I didn't know if it was anger or amusement, but it stepped closer, the hallway shrinking around me. Caught between the towering creature and the silent childlike figure behind me, I felt trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Suddenly, the child moved. Not toward me, toward the tall figure. Its small feet made no sound on the wooden floor as it approached, stopping just a few steps away from the creature. And then slowly it lifted its head. My flashlight gave out completely for one agonizing second, and when it flickered back to life, I saw the child's face clearly. It wasn't Ethan. It wasn't a child at all. Its face was pale, stretched too thin over sharp bones. The eyes were hollow, like they had been painted onto empty sockets. The lips were cracked, barely holding onto the shape of a smile. An awful twisted smile that didn't belong to anything living. The childlike figure lifted its hand toward the tall creature as if reaching for guidance or permission. The tall one leaned down, its grotesque head lowering until their faces almost touched. Then the child spoke in a low, breathless voice that echoed strangely in the narrow hallway. "She sees us." The tall figure straightened instantly, and they both turned their heads toward me at the exact same time. My body finally responded, pure panic ripping through me as I sprinted down the hallway, not daring to look back, not daring to breathe. Behind me, the sound of two sets of footsteps, one heavy and one impossibly light, began to chase me through the house. And no matter how fast I ran, they were getting closer. I flew down the stairs so fast I barely felt my feet hitting the wood. My hand skimmed the railing, missing it entirely once, sending me stumbling forward before I caught myself and kept running. The entire house seemed to twist around me, each shadow longer than it should be, each doorway darker than before. It felt like the walls were closing in, swallowing the light, swallowing me. Behind me, those footsteps didn't rush. They followed with slow, deliberate certainty, as if they already knew I had nowhere to go. When I reached the bottom of the staircase, I darted toward the living room, desperate for an exit, for a window, for anything. But the moment I stepped inside, the lights flickered violently, every lamp trembling like something was passing through their circuits. Then they all went out. Darkness swallowed the room, thick and suffocating. I pressed my back against the wall, struggling to hear past the pounding of my heart. My breath fogged the cold air. The temperature had dropped so suddenly it felt like winter inside the house. The silence was sharp, too sharp, broken only by a faint tapping from the second floor. Tap, 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 like tiny fingers trailing along the banister. Then a heavier step. Slow, heavy, measured. They were coming down. I squeezed my eyes shut for a moment, trying to steady myself, trying to think. There had been a back door in the kitchen. If I could just reach it, if I could just make it there before they reached me, I might still have a chance. I crouched low, using the faint moonlight from the windows to guide me as I moved toward the doorway. But halfway there, my foot brushed against something soft. I froze, my heart seizing in my chest. It wasn't carpet. It was fabric. Piece of clothing. I knelt, hands trembling, and felt it carefully. A coat. A man's coat. My husband's coat. I recoiled instantly. He hadn't worn this coat in months. What was it doing tossed on the living room floor? And why did the fabric feel damp and cold, like it had been outside only moments ago? The tapping upstairs stopped. The house inhaled, deep and quiet like it was waiting. I pushed myself to my feet and rushed toward the kitchen. My fingers brushed the wall, guiding me in the dark. But the second I crossed into the hallway, a whisper drifted through the air. Soft, childlike. "Mommy." I froze. My blood turned to ice. It was Ethan's voice. Perfect. Identical. Down to the fragile tremble he had whenever he'd cry after a nightmare. "Mommy, don't leave me." The voice came from the kitchen. No. I knew my son was safe. I had video called him less than 2 hours ago. He was nowhere near this house. The thing calling to me wasn't him. I stepped backward slowly, my breathing shallow. The whisper grew closer, moving toward me from the darkness ahead. "Mommy, please don't go." A shape appeared in the kitchen doorway, small, fragile, slouched slightly to one side. The childlike figure. The one from the hallway. But this time its face wasn't empty. It was wearing Ethan's face like a mask. The skin didn't fit right. It wrinkled in the wrong places, stretched too tight around the eyes, sagged strangely around the mouth. But the resemblance was enough to freeze me in place. "Come here," it whispered, tilting its head like a broken doll. "Hold me, Mommy." Its arms lifted slowly, stiffly, like marionette strings pulling them upward. Then from behind it, deep guttural bone shaking, came the sound of breathing. Heavy breathing. Too heavy to belong to anything human. The tall creature stepped out of the darkness. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I ran. I sprinted toward the front door, fumbling with the lock, my trembling hands barely able to grip the metal. Behind me, the footsteps quickened, both sets, pounding across the floors, shaking the walls. The deadbolt snapped open. I threw the door wide, and a hand slammed against it from the inside, forcing it shut again with terrifying strength. I screamed, pulling with everything I had, but the door didn't budge. The hand pressing against it slid slowly downward, leaving long streaks of dark, wet something across the wood. Behind me, the breathing grew closer. Hot, heavy, patient. I was trapped between the creatures and the only exit. And for the first time all night, I realized something horrifyingly simple. They weren't trying to scare me. They were trying to keep me here. I didn't scream this time. My voice simply wouldn't come out. My fingers were still wrapped around the doorknob, but the strength draining from my body made them feel numb, useless. The hand on the other side of the door pressed harder, the wood groaning under the pressure. Whatever was holding it shut was stronger than me, stronger than any person I'd ever known. Behind me, the breathing grew louder. The floorboards creaked, not one at a time, but in long, groaning stretches, as if something massive was dragging its weight across them. My lungs begged for air. My thoughts scattered. I felt like a cornered animal waiting for the final strike. Then, a sudden silence. The breathing stopped. The footsteps stopped. Even the house seemed to stop. The kind of silence that makes your bones twitch because you know it means something is watching you up close. Very close. I didn't turn around, but every instinct in my body screamed at me that they were right behind me. Both of them. I felt the coldness radiating from them, like standing between two open freezers. My skin prickled, my throat tightened. Slowly, the hand on the door slid away. Not quickly, not in a jerk, but in a slow, determined glide, almost like it was caressing the wood. The door creaked open just half an inch on its own weight. Not enough to escape through, but enough to let a thin slice of moonlight spill across the floor. I didn't move. I knew, somehow I knew, if I made a sudden motion they would grab me. My eyes darted to the thin sliver of light, my only chance. The only direction that didn't feel like certain death. So without looking behind me, I shifted my weight by inches, leaning into the tiniest possible opening of the door. A voice exhaled against the back of my neck. Low. Wet. Too close. Stay. A tremor ran through my entire body so violently that I almost fell forward. That one word felt like it had been pushed into my spine, vibrating through my ribs. I could smell the breath, damp, metallic, wrong. I forced myself not to flinch, not to scream, not to collapse. The childlike voice echoed next, softer, mimicking the tone of a frightened little boy. Don't leave us. My heart cracked in my chest. Hearing my son's voice, twisted, stretched, corrupted, felt like a knife. It wanted me to respond. It wanted me to believe him. It wanted me to turn around. Every muscle in my body begged me not to. I lifted my hand slowly, millimeter by millimeter, toward the edge of the door. If I could pull it just 2 more inches, I could squeeze through. 2 inches. Just 2. I didn't think about what would happen once I was outside. I just needed to get out of this house, out of this nightmare. My fingers brushed the door. I gripped it, pulled, quietly, carefully. The door moved, and something cold wrapped around my ankle. Not a hand, not a normal one at least. It felt like a cluster of fingers, too many to be human. Thin, sharp, and impossibly long. They tightened, digging into my skin, enough to make me whimper. The tall creature's breath rolled out behind me, heavy enough to vibrate the air. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I kicked back with all the power left in my body. I felt the fingers break apart like snapping dry twigs. A sickening crack echoed behind me, followed by a low, nauseating grunt. The second they loosened, I ripped the door open wide and hurled myself through the gap. A blast of cold night air hit my face like a lifeline. I stumbled into the yard, the grass wet beneath my hands and knees as I fell forward. The moon lit the world around me in a pale silver glow. Behind me, the door swung violently open, slamming against the exterior wall with an explosive bang. I pushed myself up and ran with no direction, no plan, no breath. Just pure survival. The house behind me groaned. Actually groaned like something inside it was furious. I could hear the heavy footsteps again, crossing the threshold, and the lighter ones scampering after. I didn't look back. A scream, high, shrill, unnatural, tore through the night. Not from me. From them. It sounded like the sky was ripping open. But I kept running deeper into the yard, toward the tree line, toward anything that wasn't that house. Branches slapped my arms, my dress tore, my lungs burned, but I didn't stop. Because one horrifying truth pulsed through my mind. They weren't trying to kill me. They were trying to bring me back. I ran blindly through the wet grass, branches whipping against my face, soaking my clothes, but I didn't stop. The night air was sharp, biting, each breath feeling like fire in my lungs. Behind me, the house groaned like something massive was shifting inside, and the dragging, uneven footsteps chased me relentlessly. My heart slammed against my ribs, my legs burned, but every instinct screamed to keep going. Ahead, a faint light glimmered through the trees. Hope. Safety. Anything that wasn't that house. I sprinted toward it, but the closer I got, the heavier the air felt, as if the darkness itself was trying to pull me back. The whispers followed me now, soft but urgent, threading through the trees. My name, my fears, every memory I had ever tried to bury. They weren't trying to scare me, they were calling me, luring me, binding me. I tripped over a root, falling forward onto my hands and knees. When I looked up, the figures were there, silhouettes emerging from the shadows at the edge of the forest. The tall one loomed like a nightmare, impossible and wrong, its thin limbs moving with unnatural precision. The smaller one, childlike, terrifying, stepped forward, using my son's voice again. Mommy, don't leave us. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. My legs pushed me forward, crawling through the grass like I was fleeing the air itself. The figures moved closer, but something shifted, like the wind or maybe the earth itself was helping me. A sudden gust knocked me to my side, and I slid past the forest line into a clearing bathed in pale moonlight. For the first time, I could see the open road, distant lights, a world that wasn't trapped in shadow. I staggered to my feet, gasping, desperate, running toward the lights. The whispers faded, replaced by a deafening silence that pressed against my skull. Behind me, the darkness of the house receded, but I could still feel it, a pulse in the ground, an awareness following every step. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. By the time I reached the distant streetlights, the first hint of dawn was breaking over the horizon, painting the sky in cold, pale blues. I sank to the pavement, trembling, shaking, but alive. For now. Safe. At least for now. But I knew deep down the house was still there. The darkness still waiting. And whatever had called me that night would never forget my face, my fear, or the doorway it had created through me. The streetlights blurred as I ran, each step pushing me further from the house and closer to whatever fragile safety dawn could provide. My chest burned, my lungs screamed, but I couldn't stop. The whispers had faded into the distance, replaced by a different sound, one that made my blood turn cold. A soft, dragging, deliberate shuffle, coming from the edge of the trees I had just escaped. I froze. My body refused to move. My mind screamed at me to turn and run, but instinct told me to stay. The forest shadows had shifted. Shapes lingered there, dark and tall, leaning forward like predators waiting for prey. I could see them only in fragments, glimpses of impossible limbs bending in ways no human should. Then the child's voice cut through the air again, soft and pleading, this time from behind me. "Mommy, don't leave me." My stomach dropped. I knew it wasn't my son. It couldn't be. But the imitation was flawless, down to the tremble in his tone. Every fiber of my being screamed that if I looked back, I would see what had been chasing me since that night began. I risked a glance. The tall figure had emerged from the edge of the forest, towering, leaning slightly forward. Its head jerked unnaturally as it followed me, every movement precise and deliberate, like it was counting each step I took. And the childlike figure, small, warped, its face the mimicry of my son's, glided behind it. Together they moved with terrifying coordination, as if sharing a single consciousness. The road ahead shimmered with morning light, but I felt no relief. Every step I took toward it, the darkness seemed to stretch longer, reach further, clawing at the edges of reality. The whispers returned, this time inside my own head, repeating, "You cannot leave. You are the door." My legs carried me faster. Every inch of asphalt that came under my feet felt like a victory, but the terror in my chest warned me that survival was temporary. They weren't just in the house anymore. They had followed me into the night, into the open air, into my world. And they knew me, knew my fear, knew the exact weight of my hope. As the first pale rays of dawn broke the horizon, illuminating the empty street ahead, I stumbled, collapsed onto my knees and gasped. The air felt warmer, lighter, as if the morning itself was holding me for a moment. But deep down I knew the truth. The house, the voices, the shapes, they were not gone. They had only waited for me to step into the light, to realize that no matter how far I ran, I had carried the doorway with me. And as I looked back toward the forest line, I caught the faintest shadow moving in perfect synchrony with my heartbeat, vanishing into the trees as if it had never been there, yet leaving the unmistakable sense that it had. The chase wasn't over. It had only begun. I sank to the edge of the road, my body trembling from adrenaline, cold, and exhaustion. Dawn was breaking, washing the sky in pale orange and pink, but the calm of morning didn't reach me. I could still feel the weight of the darkness, the presence of those shapes pressing against the edges of my mind, like shadows just beyond the light. My legs shook, my lungs burned, and my hands still ached from gripping the doorknob for dear life. Somewhere deep in the forest, a low, slow exhale carried through the air. I knew it was them, watching, waiting, patient. The whispers had stopped, replaced by silence so heavy it pressed against my ears and made my heartbeat echo in my skull. I realized then that this wasn't over. It would never be over. The house, the darkness, the voices, they had chosen me. They had marked me as the doorway. But for now I was alive. I was out of that house. I had run into the open world, into the sunrise, into the fragile safety of daylight. My body finally collapsed fully onto the ground, and I let myself breathe. I glanced back toward the distant tree line, half expecting to see the shadows step into the light, but there was nothing. Only morning mist. Only the faint echo of what had followed me. I didn't dare linger. Whatever had been in that house, whatever had haunted the corners of that night, would wait. And I would live for now with the knowledge that some doors once opened never truly close. The sun rose fully and I stood, wiped the tears and dirt from my face and walked forward. Into the world, into life, and into the memory of a night I would never forget.